thought you said we were going to see Silence of the Lambs, Lisa questioned as she and Billy walked down the street. Cars sped past the pair of teens as a cool breeze ruffled Lisa's navy blue windbreaker. We will, I promise, but the showing's not till way late, and I wanted to drop by the arcade as soon as it opens, Billy answered as he rubbed his wrist. How's it feeling? Lisa asked as she stuffed her hands into her pockets. Still hurts pretty bad. Getting better, though. The boy glanced over to Annie's, a diner tucked away just to their right. Several patrons sat inside, keeping to themselves as they chowed down. An elderly woman wearing thick-rimmed glasses held her coffee with shaky hands. The waitress, who handed a plate to a man in a tattered green jacket with a bushy white beard. Two men in slate-gray suits who sat in the window-adjacent booth. One of the suited men turned and locked eyes with Billy, which prompted the kid to avert his gaze. I told you a one-on-one with Kevin was a bad idea. He's built like a cinder block. Lisa shook her head. What? You didn't say that. You must have been checked out when we talked at my locker on Monday. The pair continued their walk for a few yards, then darted across the street and up to the town's arcade. Billy cupped his hands to peer in through the dirty windows, between signs and posters pasted to the inside of the glass. A rolling cascade of blinking lights glimmered at him, joined by muffled dings and chirps. He could practically smell the disorienting scent that always pervaded this place. Pungent chemical odors of cleaning supplies, which regularly battled with the owner's cheap gas station cologne. You're kidding me, they're already open? You never open this early. His exclamation was cut short by a wince when he yanked open the door. He groaned, his wrist held to the mint shade of his polo shirt while the pair walked in. I said you gotta take it easy. They were overwhelmed by that familiar stench of musty, recirculated air that flowed from a dying air conditioner near a room designated for employees. Today, however, bleach was gaining ground. A pimply teenager worked the counter, with curly red hair that fell just over his eyes. He motioned for Billy and Lisa to come over. Wyatt, how's it hanging, man? Billy primed to perform an elaborate handshake with his friend, but was visibly rejected. Oh, sorry, dude. I can't do the handshake here anymore. Terry said it's scaring the customers. Wyatt explained, his braces pushing back against his lips as he spoke. God damn it. Why's he gotta be such a stick in the mud? Whatever. Hey, why'd you guys open so early? Usually I'm right on time, Billy questioned with a hint of frustration as he leaned forward onto the counter. Because of tonight's pep rally. Terry said it might bring in more customers, Wyatt said doubtfully as he looked to the droves of people outside passing by the arcade. Billy's gaze was pulled to an unusually bright section of the arcade, partially obscured by a row of darkened machines. What's with that? Are those games having problems? Oh, it's the weirdest thing. Come on, I'll show it to you. Wyatt stepped out from behind the counter and waded into a dark corridor, pursued by Billy and Lisa. Several other teenagers and kids milled about the maze of cabinets as the trio trekked over patterned dark blue carpet. Wyatt gestured toward the cabinet, whose appearance was far from subtle. It seemed to exude a kind of palpable energy. Even on approach, Billy could feel an intense aura emanating from this thing. Yeah, the owner said it was dropped off this morning right when he got here. Delivery guy didn't even have any info on where it came from. Just said he was told to bring it here. No return address or anything. There's not even really anything on the cabinet. Other than the name, I guess. The haunting glow of the screen shined out onto the sea of blinking lights and trills that filled the space around the kids. Why are the other games turned off? Billy asked as he stepped closer to it. The entire wall of cabinets on either side of the new game had gone dark, and several others in the building, all while it hummed along quietly in its isolation. It acted as a monolith of sorts, a luminous beacon in the void, at war with the other machines and the dim and purple lighting that thrummed overhead. It didn't take kindly to the energy, perhaps its energy, being consumed by anything else. Yeah, game's kind of a power hog. Terry said it blew the breaker when they plugged it in. Had to pull all the other games just to turn the thing on. Wyatt said as his hand rested on the edge of the face panel, right next to its dual joysticks and 2 sets of large crimson buttons. White lettering spanned the top of the cabinet. Deep Space, it read, while the curved screen slowly blinked a simple "Insert Coins" message. Billy examined the cabinet, the simplistic icons of spaceships and asteroids on its side panels only broken up by the game's title, repeated twice more. It clicked quietly as he pressed the machine's options, the screen withholding any response before proper payment. I mean, it looks cool, but Billy trailed off, then reached into his pocket. He fished around, hoping to quickly snag the right change, pulling 3 quarters out. He counted them briefly before he reached down and inserted them into the blinking beast before him. The 3 teens stood in the darkest section of the arcade, lit more by the machine's screen than any bulbs overhead. Billy pressed start, suddenly greeted with an in-game menu that offered 2 options, Journey and Duel. Unsure, he pushed the joystick to select Journey mode. He met the game's outwardly simplistic design, reminiscent of its nearby counterparts. The design and visuals of the game harkened to asteroids, which sat lifeless just a few yards away. The gameplay had faded in with little fanfare, stretching over the fuzzy black screen as Billy started playing. Light reached out and twisted around him, the spaceship, debris, and salvage shown in-game casting a milky white glow onto him and his friends' faces. The game hummed and flickered as he dodged missiles from incoming enemies and navigated through a suffocating asteroid belt to Lisa's disinterest. "Billy, I think I'm gonna go home and get ready. See you at 8? She asked as she tapped his shoulder. "Uh-huh." His full attention stayed glued to Deep Space. Lisa shook her head with a less than subtle annoyance as Billy slipped into another kind of state, skillfully racking up points in the game as it buzzed, rang, and whirred like a slot machine, which further drew his attention in. Wyatt leaned in closer to watch Billy's remarkable first run at the brand new machine, astonished by the teenager's blink-and-you'll-miss-it maneuvers. Almost 10 minutes later, the game had accelerated to a near breakneck pace, with debris, enemy starships, and missiles flying past his ship at what looked like 1,000,000 miles an hour. Unfazed, his hands moved faster than lightning. Billy was dominating the game, nearing 1,000,000 points, and Wyatt took notice that he hadn't blinked or spoken for the last several minutes. It was just him, and the game. Suddenly, the enemy attack patterns changed drastically, altering their movements and adopting flanking strategies to combat Billy's masterclass of gaming skill. Billy's tactics adapted in turn, shifting sharply from the offensive to the defensive as he pulled back on the brightly hued joystick to disengage the ship's thrusters, narrowly missing the pixelated yellow bolts that sailed across the waving screen. Several more ships dropped in from the top of the screen, zipping around large asteroids that floated through the battlefield. Billy jerked the joystick from side to side and aggressively tapped the buttons that adorned the cabinet's front panel with a ferocious speed as his ship locked itself into high-velocity evasion tactics. The screen had become a near indiscernible mess of pixels. Points, damage indicators, sprites, effects, and more clogged the screen, making it all but impossible to comprehend the increasingly distracting view. Billy held a laser focus, still blocking the outside world as more ships arrived and set him on the back foot, ducking enemy fire and dodging rogue asteroids. A small crowd of impressed teenagers and kids had amassed behind Billy, all stunned at the presented proficiency with the fresh machine that stood all by its lonesome in the dark row. Everyone watched with bated breath as Billy tried a risky move and pulled away from several starfighters that sought to box him in. He succeeded, and the 2 enemy ships collided with each other as a bright orange explosion of low-resolution pixels erupted amidst the cluttered chaos around it. The small crowd around him exploded with cheers and claps as Billy shifted back to offense to force the remaining ships back. With a score nearing 2.5 million points, Billy's eyes had glazed over as his hands and fingers seemingly operated on their own. Him and the game were the central focus of a rapidly growing sea of onlookers that encircled them. Wyatt watched in amazement as his friend continued to rack up an unbelievable number of points, expertly dodging attacks and obstacles. Billy's emotionless face reflected back at him in the screen, a hazy figment refocusing as he slipped further and further from his trance. Slowly, it came into view. Yellow irises pierced his very soul, at first meaningless, but rapidly growing in presence in his mind. With a shudder and a few quick blinks, Billy's hand slipped, allowing his ship to be struck by a perfectly aimed shot from an enemy's plasma cannon. His ship exploded, before being hit with a game over screen, his final point count, and a name entry field. Just over 2.6 million points, it read, as Billy selected the letters YAR. The crowd behind him, now somewhat disappointed at the sudden end of a remarkable saga of gameplay, still cheered him on with pure joy as he stepped back from deep space, having entered his name as the first and top scorer on the game's leaderboard. Unsure of how to comprehend what happened, he turned back to his onlookers and threw his fists up in the air, wearing a look of elation. Billy turned to Wyatt, prompting him to do their handshake. Wyatt obliged, just before the entire arcade swarmed around Billy to showcase their appreciation for the outstanding free entertainment he'd just provided. He glanced back at the machine momentarily, confused at the event that had just unfolded. Billy began to feel an unease in his stomach before he moved through the parting crowd and headed for the door, while Wyatt and the others crowded around the machine to check it out. When the fresh air hit his face, Billy bent over and placed his hands on his knees. He breathed, overcome with a strange, nauseating sensation. The hazy sunlight above hurt his eyes and caused a burning he'd only felt from his longest gaming sessions in the low-lit arcade. That game had captured him like nothing he'd ever felt before. The way it moved, how it reacted to him. The enemies operated like real humans, highly strategic, yet erratic and intensely adaptable. It didn't feel like he was fighting a computer, lines of code moving in a set way, or even a predictable one. It felt like he was fighting another human. That trademark rigidity, the unwavering perfection machines applied to their actions, he didn't see any of it. No game Billy had ever played can emulate that feeling, not on its own. These developments hadn't put him off it, but intrigued him further. He turned and looked over his shoulder, able to barely see the glow of that machine cast through the arcade. He stared for a few seconds, mesmerized. Lisa's knuckles rapped against Billy's front door as a chilly gust of wind cut through her. After a few seconds, it swung open and Billy stood before her, code in hand. "You ready?" With a quiet confirmation, he stepped outside and the pair headed off to the movie theater. While they walked, Billy's mind began to drift off elsewhere, clouded with thoughts of the machine as Lisa told some story or another, likely about school. Her words manifested as noise to him when the pair neared the theater, Billy's gaze vacant as she realized his inattention. "Are you even listening to me?" Yeah. What did I say?" Beth. She did good at the, Why do I even bother?" Billy exhaled with shame. "I'm sorry, Lise. I just drifted off. Can't you just tell me again?" Billy pleaded as the pair walked down the sidewalk, approaching the arcade. "It's whatever. Come on, I'll really listen this time. Let's just get to the theater." The pair walked in uncomfortable silence as people drove by on their way home from work. Billy could feel the pull at the edge of his vision. He could almost hear its whispers as he thought to look over. He didn't want to upset Lisa any further, and craning to see the arcade would certainly do the trick. When it properly came into view, he could see the glow emanating from the building. Just one quick peek wouldn't hurt, right? She wasn't even looking at him. She wouldn't know. He readied himself, and as Lisa stared at the approaching theater marquee, Billy turned his head and fixated on the arcade. The lights were still on inside. It was a bit difficult to make out, but Billy could see rows of vacant machines. They didn't close until 8, so he figured most customers were clustered around deep space. He tried to shake the feeling of envy as the pair entered the theater and made their way to the screening room, but still it clung to him like a vile stench. Light flickered as they watched the film, surrounded by dozens of other viewers and raptured by the performances of Foster and Hopkins. His mind began to fade away in the dark room and transport him elsewhere. He was back in the arcade, his hands firmly planted on the cabinet. The stiff plastic of the joystick and the thudding tap of its buttons filled his mind like smoke in a house fire, a shadow consuming more and more of his focus, calling to him. He had to go back. He had to see it again. No, he had to play it again. Ensure his score remained on top. Billy flashed back to reality as Lisa jabbed his shoulder. The film's credits were playing, and the other moviegoers were filing out. With his stupor dissipating, the pair left and embarked on an isolating return trip to Lisa's house. With few pleasantries, they parted ways at her door, and Billy was left in the dark, icy night. The stinging cold swirled in his nose as he breathed deeply, brought by the visage of that machine. He endured a gruelingly dour Friday at school, flashes of the cabinet appearing in his mind every so often to tear him away from his work. When the bell finally rang, he made good and spent a few hollow minutes with Lisa. She could almost see it on his face. His mind wasn't here in the moment. His eyes were alive with activity, though little mind was paid to her. "Are you okay?" "Of course, why wouldn't I be?" He crossed his arms over his chest. "Because you're acting like you aren't doing drugs, are you?" "What? Why would you say something like that?" "Whoa, look, I was just wondering." "Lisa, you can't say something like that in public. That could get me kicked off the wrestling team if somebody heard you," Billy said as he leered over her. "What if I accused you of taking something? What can happen to your spot on the track team? Or your debate competitions? All that hard work down the drain." As she stared at her boyfriend's intense expression, backed up against the wall, tears swelled in Lisa's eyes. Billy's mind began to churn again, as if it had been cleared of a mental haze, but Lisa quickly pushed past him and made her way out of the school. She held a hand over her mouth to steady her shaky breathing. Billy was stunned and started to follow her as some rational part of himself, however buried, recognized the error of his behavior. But as he moved, she was already long gone. The cool air conditioning sent a chill down Billy's spine as he wandered through the dark aisles of the arcade. He didn't quite know why Lisa was so upset with him, but a few minutes with Deep Space could certainly take his mind off things. His mouth hung agape as he saw the machine's screen. His score was now firmly in second place. Someone by the letters TRK had beaten him, 2.8 million points, followed by 8 more scores, each considerably lower. This was his machine, his score to keep, and it was stolen right out from under him. That couldn't stand. He clutched the joystick and hovered his hand over the buttons and got to work. Pixel by pixel, he handily smashed the record and set a new high score of 3.1 million. As he started a new run, another teenager stepped up beside him. "Yar, I presume?" a girl's voice asked. "TRK?" Billy fired back. "The one and only." "Speaking of one and only, you might want to check the score list when I'm done here." "Is that so?" "Quarter says you're on," TRK said as she crossed her arms. "Impressive that you think you're going to beat me in one shot," Billy replied as he finished his run early. TRK stepped up to the machine and inserted the quarter as Billy moved aside. He finally had a front row seat to what everyone else had seen him do the day prior. It was almost magical to witness the precision of her moves, employing advanced tactics to outwit and outmaneuver the enemies. Then a thought slammed headfirst into him. Was it really such an intoxicating feeling, commanding the top score, that it was worth throwing away what he cared about? Suddenly, TRK stepped back. "I do believe that's the definition of showing up the competition," she stated, raising her hands. Billy looked at the screen, his mouth hanging open. 4 million points. What? How was that even remotely possible? You're good. I'll give you that. But I'm better, he stated as he slid up to the cabinet. It's only fair to let the washed-up loser play for second place before he's put out to pasture. Several other teens took notice of the unfolding battle and came over to watch as Billy chuckled. You know what? What's that? Finally giving up? This thing has 2 modes, Journey and Duel. So? Journey's just one player. Duel's the head-to-head mode. Highest score wins. Highest score wins. Okay, and you think, what? I'm gonna play nice so you don't have to admit that you can't beat my ass-kickingly high score? No. We play versus, you and me. Highest score wins. We call that the true test of skill. Any chump can beat a really big number. It takes a special kind of player to beat another person. Think you're up for the challenge, TRK? Or are you ready to be put out to pasture? Billy said with cold, steely eyes. A few audience members remarked quietly as TRK considered, a bit hesitant. She certainly couldn't shy away with so many eyes on her. Sure. And how about this? To make it definitive, loser stops coming around this arcade. You're on. Both teens stepped up to the dark altar, each willing to hand over a piece of themselves to this mechanical beast to preserve their pride. The screen flickered with lurid anticipation as TRK calmed her mind. I'm Angela. Huh? Billy asked as he highlighted dual mode. That's my name. Figure, if we're fighting for ownership of this arcade, you should at least know my name. I'm Billy. His curt words cut right through her as he slammed his fist onto the button to start their match. What had, moments ago, been a volley of trash talk was now a mute, focused display. Neither of them could afford to expend even a shred of energy on the other. They had to play at their absolute best if they wanted to leave this arcade free of shame. The screen thrummed with light as Billy and TRK battered the machine's controls, racking up over 1 million points in just a few short minutes. It was almost otherworldly to witness. Kids gathered behind them, astonished by the champion's skill. Flashes of color and pixelation choked the screen, its light seeming to distort before them. Billy's hands began to ache. His eyes burned. His injury hadn't done much to impede his ability, but this felt as though days' worth of overusage was coming down on top of him all at once. Still, he couldn't let up. Without warning, TRK's voice broke the silence. I was trying to figure out where I knew Yar from. That's the Atari game, right? Her words took longer than usual to process in Billy's mind, as his eyes stayed glued to the twisting pixels in front of him. Yeah, my brother gave me a bunch of games in his Atari before he left for college. I guess I just liked Yar's Revenge the most. What's the story with TRK? My dad's initials? Thomas Robert Kellerman? Angela said as she stared at the screen. Why'd you pick his initials? Billy could feel that fire returning inside him, the need to destroy TRK. He had to win this game. There was no other option. No truce, no loss. It had to be him. The machine had called out to him, and him alone. His connection to the cabinet was greater than anybody else's. As light from the screen reached out to him, a second voice started to speak behind TRK's. Well, my dad was the one who got me into video games. He had an old C64 we used to poke around on in our garage. He tried to tune her out, to just focus on that faint noise like a dial on a radio. It was there, unmistakably. The machine was speaking to him. Finally, it had made contact. Billy's eyes focused in on the screen. The game had quickly vanished as the pair plugged away at the controls. They had long since begun to shift out of this plane of reality. He could feel a strange sensation overwhelming him. It burned in his veins, tightened his chest. He felt his fingertips slowly lose feeling, growing heavier in their movement. He passed away almost a year ago. Angela stopped speaking as something fell over her. A dark feeling of doom fraught with flashes of her father. Just a cheap tactic to rip him from his focus. Meaningless signal in the haze as he tuned to receive more of the cabinet's captivating message. Right now, if he were to focus on anything else, he would lose the machine's voice for good. He knew it. Wow. Bummer. His words commandeered Angela's attention for only a second, but that was enough. Her spaceship collided with rogue debris, and she was blinded by a white flash as the machine displayed "Game Over" in her face. A look of shock overtook her as Billy continued to play the game. His hands pressed buttons and moved the joystick, even as the cabinet faded to its high score screen. The teen's eyes were wide, almost twitching as the crowd erupted with cheers for the victor. The sound tore Billy free from whatever space he'd been dragged into, and as his presence of mind returned to him, he entered his name, YAR, at the very top of Dual Mode's otherwise empty leaderboard. The final count? 5,309,721 points. Billy had conquered both modes. He felt unstoppable as he backed away from the cabinet, its radiant vibrations seeming to lose their grasp on him. He turned to face the crowd, and as he threw his arms up in exuberance, he watched Angela quickly leaving the arcade. Joy melted from his face to make way for stark despair. What was he doing? He felt a twinge at the base of his skull. He didn't dare turn around, but he could feel it. That machine. It was watching him, conditioning him into something unnatural. Billy broke free from the moment and hurried after Angela. He had to. The door dinged as he stepped out into the cool air. She was gone. Billy looked around, plagued with anxiety and an abyssal sense of regret. What the hell had that thing done to him? He swallowed hard as he stared through the dark glass at its glow. That light shined over the top of the machines in front of it, a reminder that it was still there, waiting for him to come back. And it knew he wouldn't be able to resist.
Occasionally, we get the occasional circus person in the audience, however. There he is. How do you do, sir? Nice to see you.
The faint noise of David Letterman filled the ground floor of his house as Billy lay in bed, his sunken eyes fixed on the ceiling.
To all the older people watching the show. Hello, older people.
What little sleep he'd gotten in the days that followed was restless and dominated by recurring visions of the machine. Even as his consciousness faded into sleep, it stayed with him in his dreams, taking root in every moment of his life. Billy sat at the edge of his bed, with both hands pressed to the sides of his head. It hurt. God, it hurt so much. He couldn't see or hear or think of anything but that goddamn arcade. The black tower that had given him a feeling he'd never experienced before, something unlike any other earthly sensation. It called to him. A voice, gilded and dark, whispered to him. Those words stayed in his mind all night, his eyes wide and pulsating with the hunger for that machine. He needed to go back, see it one more time. The tower had burned itself into his mind so vividly, yet flashes of how he treated others persisted. Lisa, Angela, they had no part in his connection with the machine, but still they suffered. Billy pressed his hands and face to the smudged glass of the arcade's window. That glow was gone. His breath was shaky as he scanned the dark interior in search of it. A weight pressed down around him, tightening like a coil. Where was it? He had felt it so palpably just the night before, and now its voice had fallen silent. Billy's bleary eyes darted back and forth before they settled on several silhouettes on approach from the rear of the building. His face wore a distinctly haunted look as the figures unlocked the door and walked outside. Two men, clad in slate gray suits, accompanied by Terry, who appeared both relieved and visibly drained. The truck should be here soon, then we'll be out of your hair. You really have to take it? I mean, I'm not sure why the government needs an arcade machine. Couldn't you guys just, buy your own?
I said before, that information's classified, but we appreciate your assistance here.
As the man laid eyes on Billy, he was startled by the image of the haggard teen.
Jesus, kid, what's wrong with you? You look like you saw a ghost.
The man went quiet as he studied Billy. The teen tried to look at the man, but he couldn't resist the pull that drew his attention to the silent arcade. The games had all been disabled. Even the glow from deep space was absent. The man turned his head and pondered for a moment, then further observed the kid.
Gus, would you compensate our friend here for his troubles?
His associate pulled Terry away, leaving the man and Billy alone.
Did you play that arcade machine?
Billy stared back, but still managed to nod his head. The man looked around, then removed a wallet from the inside of his jacket and pulled out a business card. He handed it to Billy, who scanned the words on it carefully.
You never should have had anything to do with that machine, kid. It's unnatural.
For as beset as Billy was by this machine's demand, the chasm left in its wake came with a bizarre sense of relief. He'd become so swept up by it, yet now, as he spoke to this man, he no longer felt its hold. The color had been drained to Billy's face, his eyes sunken and sagging, but he seemed now to have been freed from that oppressive weight on his shoulders. The man pulled a small flashlight from his other pocket and shined it in Billy's eyes, who reacted with a dull hiss before he rubbed at them.
You'll probably feel unwell for some time. Physical activity might be more exhausting than normal, but you should return to a healthy state in a few weeks. If you still feel like this in a month or so, or if you see anything strange at all, you call the number on that card.
So that's it? The machine's gone and things are just supposed to return to normal?
Sorry, kid, but normal's a myth.
Those words clattered around in Billy's skull as he stood there in a stupor. A box truck pulled up not long after, and several people helped the man and his associates wheel the arcade cabinet out on a dolly to the truck. Seeing it like this, the screen devoid of life, its power cord slung over its front panel and taped in place, it seemed so pathetic now. How could this, if held such tremendous power over him, strip out his personality and replace it virtually overnight? Billy watched as the lifeless husk of the cabinet was loaded into a truck, confounded. The suited men departed a few minutes later, leaving Terry to wander back inside, clutching a check. His eyes drifted down to the black business card. Special Agent Anderson, the pearl-colored text read. Below that, an out-of-state phone number. Billy ran a hand over his head and exhaled. He was spent, broken down, but he still knew there was something he needed to do. His fist knocked weakly on Lisa's front door, and soon after that, he was met with a displeased, uncomfortable look from her as she stood face to face with her boyfriend. He hesitated, then finally choked out his words. Lisa, I am so sorry.